So welcome everyone. It's great to be with you, great to be together. I hope the summer's going well and lots going on in the world, and a lot of challenging things with the fires and the floods, and feels like the climate, the world is telling us something, and we need to act very, very, very quickly. We're going to turn things around if we're going to continue to live on a planet that is inhabitable. Good to be here together, sharing these teachings and these practices of the Dharma, of the Buddha's teachings, which I think can be a huge support in these difficult times, in these challenging times. Welcome if anyone is joining us for the first time. I think almost everyone is fairly regular, come before, but if you're here for the first time, I'm Hugh Byrne. I teach the Sunday morning class. We've excuse me. We've had a class on Sunday morning for 20 years. I think we're in the 21st year. Most of those under the auspices of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington. And then more recently, the Center for Mindful Living, which is part of IMCW, and a wonderful community, physical community in the Tenleytown area of DC, but now much broader than that, to include people around the country and in other countries as well. It's always good to be together at this time and share these teachings, these practices. Just the format of the class, we've been beginning with a meditation and then having a talk. And then Emily will lead us in some movement, some guided kind of mindful movement, lovely coming into our bodies, which we can sometimes forget. We can kind of be in our heads a lot. So it's really a powerful practice to mindfully move and practice together. And then we'll have some sharing, depending, I'm not sure today whether we'll share in the small groups or we'll share in the full group. We'll see how the time goes today, and then we'll finish with a shorter meditation and some announcements to finish. So maybe just a short reflection before we go into the meditation. And I the theme today is broadly is on training the mind, kind of something that's familiar, because that's what we're doing really when we practice, when we come to a class or we practice on our own, we're training the mind, we're cultivating qualities that will serve us, that will lead to greater well-being, to happiness, ultimately to freedom. And we learn and cultivate ways of letting go of mind states and qualities that don't serve us, that lead us to suffering. So that's kind of what we'll be exploring today. And we're just sharing a little bit at the beginning before we formally got started. I'm remembering my mother today and this week. I mean, I remember her a lot, but it's the 3rd anniversary of her death. On August the 11th will be Wednesday of this coming week. And one of the things I found just really over the last couple of years since she's died, very much how she stays with me, as I'm sure for each of you, loved ones stay with you, you know, in different ways, stay in our hearts and stay in our memories. And over the time, over this last 3 years, I have three. I think of them as kind of spiritual guides to me. One is my mother, who's very much in my heart, and you know, if I find myself kind of getting caught up in my head and getting caught up in a kind of a tight space, or you know, life is, you know, feels kind of overwhelming, or you know, too much or whatever, I kind of bring her into my mind and into my heart, you know, because I find opening my heart tends to, allowing my heart to open can kind of bring me down or out of any of those kind of states, which are, in one way, they're illusory because, you know, they're not the truth, but they can feel kind of painful and difficult at the time. And I have two other guides who, you know, who are very much present for me. One is John Lewis, the great civil rights icon and hero and, you know, beloved being who left us just over a year ago. You know, just he is an inspiration to me, as I know he is to many others too, of courage, of dedication, and of love, really, you know, of just, you know, keeping the heart open, even to those who, you know, would want to do you harm, you know. So, you know, it's such an incredible bodhisattva in that way, even though he wouldn't kind of see himself in so much in the kind of the language, if you like, of the Buddhist bodhisattva, but more, you know, in the Christian tradition. But I'm reading this book, which is just kind of things, some reflections of his that he shared and kind of put into book form before he died, and just recently come out. It's called Carry On, John Lewis, Carry On, Reflections for a New Generation. And one of the things I was just reading last night in here, and it, you know, since I was thinking about training the mind and training the heart, he said, we didn't just show up and march. And this is, you know, he said it's on learning, it could be called on training. We didn't just show up and march. We had training and we developed a plan. We studied intently the philosophy of nonviolence. Like any discipline that you try to master, you need to constantly train, practice, and enhance your skills. If you want to learn an instrument, you have to spend time in the practice room working on your technique. When it came to understanding and practicing the nonviolent philosophy, we had to learn not to respond to anything that made us angry, upset, or bitter. We had to learn how not to be provoked. And he goes on to talk about how they trained themselves of being at a lunch counter, for example, and having people pour things on them, like it could be hot tea or hot coffee or something, and sometimes even putting out cigarettes in their hair. And they had to train for that so that they wouldn't kind of get caught up in anger or whatever. You know, he said there are many discussions about how to respond if violently attacked, and we developed best practices. You know, he talked about how they would defend themselves if people were kicking them, etc. And he said, we always tried to maintain eye contact with our attackers, because that meant sending a message that I am still human and so are you. When you look your assailant in the eye, you level the playing field because you envelop them in your humanity, and you may get them to find some empathy. We even encouraged protesters to smile, not to be smug, but to be decent and polite, and always to be non-violent. And this, I love this, he says, we were taught to see our attackers in a new light. Think of them as recently born babies. They surely weren't born with hate in their hearts. What went wrong in their lives to bring them into the moment that they're in today? Was there something insufficient in their upbringing? Did they lack the emotional support at home? Did someone teach this child to hate and abuse others? Don't give up on your assailants. Try to understand them. It's not easy and it takes considerable work. And he talked about the teacher, Reverend Lawson, who I believe is still with us, who was the teacher, and a compatriot of Dr. King, and a wonderful being. But kind of reflecting that John Lewis, that those words could very much come from the Buddha, or somebody, a teacher in the Buddhist tradition, because it's a universal, responding. Jesus said, "Turn the other cheek." Responding to hatred with love, not with hatred. So thinking about John Lewis, who's kind of, for me, is a spiritual guide, and particularly in the area of wise action, wise action in the world. What do we do in the world? Not just kind of in ourselves, but also in the world. And the third spiritual guide is Rob Babea, who I've spoken about at different times. Rob, Rob died just over a year ago as well, back in May of 2020, I shared, I've listened to all of his talks on Dharma Seed, about 450 of them, accompanying me every day. And I think of that as, in part, as kind of a bow of gratitude to him for his life, because he speaks, when you listen, even if, the theme might not be, one that at that moment might be connecting with you, but there's so much of a speaking from the heart, speaking from the truth. You kind of, people talk about somebody, I could listen to them reading the phone book and I'd still be, still feel that, because there would be that heartfulness there, and that's very much there, and just a fierce truth, a fierce honesty, a truth, speaking truth. Sometimes speaking truth to power, speaking from the heart, and in times of difficulty or challenge, those are my three kind of main spiritual guides. I also think of, certainly in the room, Leonard Cohen's there, Mary Oliver is definitely there, and many other beings as well. So I don't know, maybe you have people in your own life, they could be people who are alive, but also people who've passed on, but who, in a way, you can kind of reach out to, you can bring into your heart. And sometimes, I talk about gratitude as a way of kind of getting out of our heads, getting out of our focus on what's wrong, into just recognizing and being grateful for what we have, being thankful, kind of a real shift in the mode. So I'll continue after we've had a meditation, maybe just sharing those initial reflections, maybe inviting into the space together, whoever you want to bring with you today, just feel that they're here with you. Maybe they're not physically here, maybe they're not in this kind of life anymore in the human form, but they're still with us. And next week, as I mentioned, I'll talk more about that later. We'll have a more formal practice of remembering, but just for now, feeling those, perhaps bringing in those people who've been important to you in your life, in helping you become who you are, help you open your heart. Perhaps there's teachers that you've connected with, family members, maybe parents, loved ones. Just recognizing and remembering that we're not, we're not just these atomized individuals, that we come from our ancestors, both our physical ancestors, those we connect with, our spiritual ancestors, the ancestors who brought us, who allow these teachings to be alive in the way they are for us today, have passed on the teachings of their dedication, their heartfulness to pass on the teachings down to us from the Buddha's time through 100 generations, but all these spiritual teachers from so many traditions. We often bring Rumi into the room, welcome him as a guest, and welcome all the guests, certainly welcoming the poets, the Rilkes and the Mary Olivers, and so many others, and those among us who are poets, to just feel that we're, particularly in these times, which have been such difficult times, say particularly this last year and a half of COVID, so much loss, so much changed, so many challenges and difficulties in our lives, that just to bring in all the support we can to recognize that we're really together. This gift of Sangha, feeling us all here together. So as we begin the meditation, you might close your eyes, just get into a position, a posture that's comfortable, relaxed. Where you can sit with a sense of dignity, grace, with some ease. You can close your eyes if you like to, let the attention come inward. You might consciously take a few, 3 or 4 longer, deeper breaths to help you arrive and settle as fully as you can right now. A nice deep in-breath, filling the lungs, filling the chest. And then on the out-breath, letting go, releasing. Imagine anything you're holding might be released. Any tensions, any tightness, contraction, just letting it go. And as you breathe in a nice deep in-breath, letting the energy come in, energy from life. And then breathing out, letting go, releasing. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. And when you're ready, just letting the breath settle back into its natural rhythm. It's a sense of ease, breathing in and breathing out. And you might invite a smile. The smile helps us relax a little more relaxing the body and the mind. Maybe thinking about someone who makes you feel happy or joyful. And if you can, just take in the smile. Take it into your heart. And let the smile be an expression of your attitude towards whatever's coming up, towards life. You meet life with the expression of a smile. You could do a brief scan of the body, see if there's any area where you might be unconsciously tensing up, that you could relax a little bit more. Maybe the face, the forehead, the eyes, the facial muscles, the chin, the mouth. Inviting the area of the face, the head, to relax, be at ease. And the shoulders, the upper back, the back of the neck. Inviting a relaxing. Imagine you're putting down a pack that you've been carrying. The chest and the torso, where we often tense up. Often it's unconscious. If something feels difficult or threatening, we tend to contract. And often we can carry that contraction with us. It's kind of energy within the body. So just consciously inviting the chest, the belly to relax, be at ease. Letting the whole of the upper body be at ease. Down into the lower body, the buttocks, the groin, the abdomen, thighs, down to the legs and the calves and the feet. Letting the body relax. When the body is at ease, the mind tends to be at ease. And when the mind is calm and at ease, the body tends to be more relaxed and at ease too. Just being here in the space you are, opening to what's present right now. You might bring your awareness to your whole body, as a field of energy. In the body, the space a little bit around the body, and just notice what's present for you. Just bringing awareness to the body as a whole. And meet whatever's here with quality of kindness. If anything feels challenging or difficult, You could put your hand on your heart, maybe the other one on the belly, whatever feels comfortable, whatever feels could express a caring for yourself, for your life. It's wishing yourself well. Share this poem, an old Native American elder story rendered in English by David Wagoner, called Lost. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger. Must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying, here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. So opening to what's present right now for you in the body, in the heart, in the mind. See how it is to make space for whatever is calling for attention. The bodily sensations, just feeling them, letting them come, letting them be, letting them go. Meeting whatever's present, whatever's calling for attention, with kindness, with acceptance, with care. Can your attitude be one of welcoming, welcoming the guests, as Rumi says? He says the dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. making space for the life that's here. Whatever's present right now comes out of causes and conditions that may be very complex. They've gone on a long time. But what we can do is we can transform our experience by how we meet what's arising. So meeting what's coming up. It might be a memory, a sad, some memory comes up that has a tinge of sadness in it. Without awareness, that can easily turn into a story. Oh, so alone, or so much miss this person. And then kind of we go off into another kind of more virtual reality. But the teachings invite us to stay with the direct experience. Let go of the story and just be present if there's tightness around the heart or around the eyes, for example. Just to allow those feelings and sensations to be here, to come and to go in their own time, making space for them, meeting them with kindness, without judgment, without resistance. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. It may be helpful to cultivate a focus for your attention or a home base where you rest your attention. And particularly if the mind is very active, very busy, to have that focus, whether it's the breath, the body, sound, or an object that we focus on. Just letting the attention rest. For many of us, the breath is a powerful support. Very connected with our sense of well-being, or at times unease or dis-ease. We're feeling tight or tense, the breath tends to be short, shallow. So, and we can use the breath to help us relax as we do with the deeper breathing. We can also just use the breath as an anchor for our awareness, just being aware of breathing in and breathing out. Letting that be the kind of the base of attention. Other things will be going on around, sounds and feelings, but letting the breath be in the foreground. And when the mind goes off into stories and thoughts and plans, wherever it goes, you can just gently and kindly come back to the breath, come back to the body, as we pay attention to our breathing, as we bring awareness to the breath, and as we come back out of thoughts, back to the body, back to the breath. We're training the mind. We're strengthening this power of attention, conscious awareness. So much of our practice is about beginning again, about forgetting and remembering, about getting caught up in stories or getting caught up in strong emotions or mind states, and kind of getting in some way hijacked by our feelings or by our emotions. But all we have to do is just to be aware, just to see, to notice, oh, I'm caught up. And immediately we're back, we're home again. And even if we do that many, many times in a day, each time we do that, we strengthen that capacity to live more fully in our bodies, in our hearts, in our lives. Holding whatever is present with kindness and with acceptance. We'll finish with Mary Oliver's poem, When Death Comes. When death comes like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps his purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does towards silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. There's something about Mary Oliver's poem, that When Death Comes, that like every time I read it, it becomes more powerful to me. That's stepping through the door full of curiosity, wondering what's it going to be like, that cottage of darkness. Each body a lion of courage. I was a bride married to amazement, a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. I love the way that poetry can kind of help us drop down out of the kind of the overly conceptual mind, you know, just kind of those images kind of grab me in a way that's very, very powerful. And I know others feel that too. And I think of it, poetry as very much part of this training of the mind. I'm wanting to share a few reflections on today, and probably a fairly short talk given the time. But I wanted to I mean, one thing to say really is that probably all of the practice is about training the mind and the heart. But I want to just make a few points about the specifics of training the mind. You know, there's this saying from the Buddha that nothing can do you more good than a trained mind. Not even your mother or your father could do you more good than a trained mind. Nothing can do you more harm than an untrained mind. Not even your worst enemy could do you more harm than an untrained mind. So it's a pretty strong statement. And when I, you know, before I'm going to talk about something, I tend to just kind of do a few checks, you know, internet, and, you know, what have people said about that and stuff. And then I found that quote under fake Buddha quotes. And if you go on the internet, you'll find, you know, these sites that are, you know, some of fake Buddha quotes, what the Buddha never said, you know, these sites. And I'm sure, I know I actually found one on Camus as well, you know, what Camus something didn't say or something like that. And so probably you don't have to be the Buddha, you could be anyone who's kind of said memorable things and somebody has made up stuff. anyway, so I checked it out, and then it quoted Jack Cornfield, and I checked it out, and the actual quote is, whatever harm, excuse me, whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind inflicts on oneself a greater harm. And then neither mother, father, nor any other relative can do one greater good than one's own well-directed mind. I read that, and I don't find that, I mean, I don't want to get into quibbles, but that really, I feel that Jack was, maybe just a paraphrase of the Buddha's teaching. I mean, that's what he's saying, we harm ourselves through our untrained mind, and we can do ourselves great good through training the mind. And that's the essence of it. And for the Buddha, training the mind is really what the practice is. It's the fourth of the Noble Truths. The Noble Eightfold Path is the path of training in, as we do in meditation, in concentration, in wise effort. It's a path of training in living wisely and compassionately through wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood. And it's a training in wisdom, cultivating wisdom through wise understanding and wise intention. So the central teaching of the Buddha of suffering and the end of suffering, the Four Noble Truths, has at its core the path to the end of suffering, the training of the mind, training of the heart and the mind to wake up. So training of the mind for the Buddha is the most important thing, that we could do, is to train the mind. Other things you could do, being reverent or being generous, giving donations, etc. I mean, that can be part of training the mind, but it's the training of the mind that's the most important thing. It's not so much whether you give or you don't, but it's a way of opening the heart and training the mind. So in the Buddha's in the Buddhist understanding, the fundamental difference, the most meaningful difference between people is not based on race, religion, ethnicity, wealth, poverty, physical ability or disability, any of those things. None of those things, I mean, those things are obviously, they're important, and it's important we pay attention to them, in terms of inclusion and equity and all of that. But in terms of what differentiates people, the fundamental difference is between a trained mind and an untrained mind. That's what, because the trained mind leads us towards happiness and the untrained mind leads us towards suffering. So that's the the fundamental dichotomy in the whole Buddhist teaching and tradition, is not between good and bad, as though some people are born good and some people are born bad. Some people are chosen and some people are not chosen. The difference is in terms of whether we train our minds, we train our hearts. So, when the Buddha talked about nobility, for him, it didn't matter whether you were from the highest caste or the lowest caste or anything in between. Caste is a cause of great suffering in where the Buddha lived and taught, and in other places as well. As an aside, recommend Isabel Wilkerson's book with that name, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, I think is the name of her most recent book, a very, very powerful book. But one of the things when people, whatever class or caste of society they came from, when they joined the Sangha, all of that fell away. None of that was meaningful. What became meaningful in a certain way was, if you've been ordained before somebody else, you'd get your meals before them. That was a kind of seniority, but it wasn't a fundamental difference. For the Buddha, the only meaningful nobility was nobility of the heart, nobility of the spirit, nobility of the heart. That's what we want to cultivate. Compassion, generosity, gratitude, loving kindness, mindfulness, equanimity. These are all qualities that will bring nobility of the heart. They'll free the heart. They'll allow us to be generous, kind, connected with others, to act wisely in the world. That's the nobility that matters, not nobility of rank or wealth or class or any of those kind of really insignificant differences. What I've always found inspiring about the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, this tradition, is that rather than seeing us as, irredeemably evil or, lacking or needing something outside of ourselves to free us, or that we're divided into good people and bad people, or chosen people and people who aren't chosen, but that to see that we all have within us the capacity for great good, and we also have the capacity for great harm. I think back, and I may have shared this in another time, I just think back and earlier times in my life where I could have made choices that could have taken me in a direction which would have been not the way I would have liked to have gone. I don't mean that I'd been necessarily in prison or whatever, but I'm there were things that I did that I think in my younger days were self-centered, were, and again, I'm not beating myself up, but just seeing that, maybe self-absorbed, that if I'd have continued to fuel those things could have made me not the person that I would want to be in the world, or at least would have required me to do a lot of untangling to get out of that. I mean, not saying there wasn't some untangling that was needed, but so I see very much that everyone, even those who cause great harm in the world, who we tend to think of as the other, those people, those bad people, they, just like all of us, have seeds within them that could have taken them in another direction, but that they've gone in the direction that they've gone in. I'm not saying now that there's not moral responsibility. We do have that responsibility for the choices that we make. But I think all of us, I mean, a kind of an image, I think that's a helpful one that Thich Nhat Hanh uses. He says, we all contain seeds within us. We contain seeds of kindness, seeds of generosity and gratitude and compassion. But we also contain seeds within us of anger, of greed, of blame, of hostility. And what's important is, not that somebody has more of those or more of these. The important thing is, which of the seeds are we nurturing? What are we watering? What are we giving? What are we cultivating? And that's really the meaningful difference between us. In our life is, what are the choices we're making about the seeds that we nurture? Do we nurture seeds of generosity and gratitude and kindness? Or do we nurture seeds of anger, greed, hostility, confusion? And what's important in terms of our happiness and our well-being is really training ourselves to training the mind and the heart so that we do nurture seeds that lead to greater happiness and to well-being, rather than seeds that lead to our own suffering and to harm to others. And so all of the practices of the Buddha are basically designed to help us do two things. One, to starve, if you like, the seeds that would lead to harm, not nurture them, abandon them, abandon the unskillful. The Buddha says, you can do this. If you couldn't do it, I wouldn't ask you to do it. If it led to harm, I wouldn't ask you to do it. But because it leads to happiness and well-being, I say, abandon what's unskillful. So when we see ourselves caught up in unskillful thoughts or behaviors, to see the possibility of letting them go. And the second is to cultivate the good, cultivate the qualities of heart and mind that will lead to open-heartedness, that lead to connection, that lead to love, that lead to compassion and kindness, and that ultimately lead to freedom of the heart. So freedom of the heart comes through training the heart and the mind in this letting go of what's unskillful and the cultivation of the good. And we can look at this in a kind of moment-to-moment level. We can look at it in terms of our intentions broadly for our practice and for our life, but we can look at it moment to moment. What happens when an untrained mind meets pleasant experiences that come in? There's something, we see something we like, and this is very attractive. Maybe it's another person, or maybe it's some food, or if we crave drink or something, might be drink. Whatever it is, we look at it. Without awareness, that pleasant experience, whether it's a pleasant sight or sound or taste or feeling, anything that comes in through our five senses, but also through our mind, through our thinking process, through our cognizing process. Anything that comes in that's pleasant, if we're not aware, that easily turns into wanting more, craving, grasping, craving, clinging, all the things that can lead us to unskillful behavior. We'll do things to get more of the things we like. We'll push people out of the way that prevents us from getting what we want. It can come out as greed, come out as hatred if the things we're wanting, where people are trying to take them away from us. So without awareness, the pleasant easily leads to suffering, through craving, through clinging, through greed, maybe even to addiction. Addiction comes out of that, the stimulus, it's pleasant. After a while, we like it more. We feel the need for it more. And if it's a particular kind of substance, it can lead to addiction. But we can have, it could be a video game, we get to like it, we get so absorbed with it. Fortunately, that's not been one of my things. I'm unfortunately from another generation and never got pulled down. But I've certainly, the other ways I've been pulled in that direction and know it firsthand, as I'm sure we all do. So that's what can happen when the mind, without awareness, with awareness, we can open to that pleasant experience. We can allow it to, the feelings to come, to go, and just see the pleasant as pleasant. Oh yeah, that is pleasant. We can like it, we can enjoy it, but without, contracting around it, without like, I've got to hold on to it, I've got to have it. So we can bring a skillful attitude, of non-clinging, of non-grasping, craving to that experience. And we can bring the quality of just letting be, letting it come, letting it be, letting it go. So just in that moment-to-moment experience, we can see suffering and how suffering gets created, and we can see how freedom gets nurtured and developed. So in that moment, where do we go? When the thought goes to, I love this, I like it, I want more, and then we grasp more. Oh yeah, I really do like it, want more and more. we have to bring awareness. Without awareness, we'll just tend to keep going down that path. But with awareness, we can say, okay, noticing, come back, breathe, let it come, let it go. And we train our mind to go in that direction rather than to go in the direction of the habitual, of a kind of defaulting to the wanting mode. So whenever we see the pleasant arising and that sense, the mind, tending to contract around it, we can just noticing that. Can I see that and let it go, let it come and go? And it's just the same turned around with the unpleasant. What happens with the unpleasant? Perhaps it's even more obvious a lot of the time. Some feeling comes up that we don't like. We kind of want to push it away, or there's some emotion that feels, I don't like this, feel sad, or, difficult memory comes up, feel ashamed, or kind of want to push that away. And in the pushing away, we actually strengthen that, aversive reaction. I've often quoted Carl Jung when he says, what you resist persists. When we have that resistance, aversion to anything, we're not actually pushing it away. It actually stays, or it'll come back, it'll change form, but it will stay around. Because what we need to do is we need to deal with the underlying energy of that aversion, that pushing away. So we train the mind in that same way. As the pleasant can lead to clinging and craving and even to addiction, the unpleasant can lead to pushing away, to aversion, to can lead to hatred. Somebody we don't like or rubs us the wrong way. We think, oh, I don't like them. They're a horrible person. We create thoughts around them of like, oh yeah, there they go again. And we solidify them. They become, what Tara Brach calls the unreal other. It becomes them. They're always doing this. They're always letting their dog bark, or they're always saying mean things in meetings or whatever. And we solidify them, and we kind of make them into one-dimensional or two-dimensional. And in that way, we perpetuate suffering through attaching to the aversion, through clinging. Really what we're doing, we're clinging to our dislikes. But in the same way, and then that can also lead to all sorts of harm. You think of all of the wars and the conflicts that come up, they actually have their origins in the human mind and the human heart, and they get collectivized. These people, if we don't kill them, they'll kill us. If you read about the Rwandan genocide, and how people's minds were turned in the direction of hating, hating people just because of their ethnicity, and then to kill them, and many people did that. And that all comes out of the human mind and the human heart, that we humans have, we've clung to aversion, we've solidified it. And after a while, that aversion solidified turns into that othering. And then when we've really created the other in our mind, then we can almost do anything to them. They're doing this. We see it we've seen it in recent years in our own politics of, them, don't let them come in, or them, and creating the other. Unfortunately, it's not all one-sided either. We do it ourselves. Even though we might think we have enlightened views, we still can easily find ourselves clinging to our views and separating ourselves. So all of this is to say that we do it with the pleasant, we do it with the unpleasant. We create separation. with awareness, that same unpleasant feeling or that difficult feeling can be felt. We can allow it, as we do in meditation. We can let it come, let it be, let it go. You know, welcome the guests, make space for it. Not that it's always easy, by no means is it always easy. And that's why it's a training. You know, if it were easy, we could probably just say, oh, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to let go of these harmful things that I've been doing, these behaviors. Well, if we've been doing them for 20 years or 40 years or whatever, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be like turning the oil tanker around or whatever, you know, turning climate change, turn the oil tanker around so we're not digging it out of the ground that we're, and I don't want to take the metaphor too far, but you know what I mean, that it takes some turning, it takes some effort to change, it takes some training to change. You know, we train ourselves to do that. The more we do it, the more we strengthen the capacity of the mind and heart to be able to be with what's unpleasant, to be with the pleasant without holding on to it or craving it. And even with the neutral, what we tend to do is find it boring, you know, something, you know, we're sitting and it's not unpleasant, but it's kind of neutral. Well, the mind may find it much more interesting to go off and check our emails or our Facebook posts or our, you know, video game or something that'll kind of, you know, quote, be more exciting. So in each of these ways, we kind of escape our experience because something is better that's not what I'm experiencing right now. Either in terms of wanting more, you know, in a craving kind of way, or wanting to push something away, disliking it. With awareness, we can just see the impermanence, the lack of self in this experience, in this feeling, in this thought, in this sensation. We can let them come and go. And in that process, we can come into a more spacious relationship with our experience, a more fluid relationship with our experience. We can train our minds. The mind can be trained. And the fruit of training the mind is well-being, greater well-being, less suffering, less being caught up in the aversive states or being caught up in the craving states or being caught up in the confused states, which we can easily get into as well. So training the mind, training the heart. There are different paths of training. You know, the Buddha's path is just one of many. You could look at it as a way of seeing or a way of looking that can lead us to the deepest happiness. There are other ways of looking as well, you know, other traditions. You know, in Carlos Castaneda's books, Don, you know, the sorcerer, the shaman, Don Juan, you know, talks about, you know, any path. You know, there are different paths to well-being, to happiness. The important thing is, he says, does the path have heart? Does the path have heart? You know, does it help open our hearts? And that's something, if a path doesn't have heart, maybe that's something to think about. The Buddha's path that I spoke about earlier, the path of training in meditation, in wise and compassionate living, and in cultivating wisdom, for me is probably the fullest path I could imagine. I don't see anything missing. I mean, obviously we can put it in the language of today, but what the Buddha was teaching about and pointing to 2,500 years ago, even though our world has changed in such extraordinary ways in 25 centuries, we still have these hearts and minds and bodies that get caught up, that get caught up in suffering, that can lead to great unhappiness in our lives if we don't train our minds, if we don't train our hearts and minds. And we have the same hearts and minds that with training, that we can realize the deepest freedom today, just the same way as 2,500 years ago. So while everything's changed in fundamental ways, we're still struggling humans. You know, if we weren't struggling humans, struggling in the same way as people were 100 generations ago, I don't think the world would be in the place that it is today. I don't think our politics would be in the place that it is today. I think, you know, if we had found a way collectively to bring these teachings and other wise and skillful teachings into, you know, fully into our own hearts and minds and collectively into the world, I don't think we would be, you know, I think things would be different today. But we're really, we're still needing to wake up, to train the heart, to train the mind, to attain the freedom that the Buddha attained and many others through the centuries have achieved as well. Ending suffering in our lives, ending suffering a little or a lot or completely, as Ajahn Chah speaks about. And I think this is our challenge today, not just to transform our own hearts and minds, but to transform our world so that our world becomes, you know, a more livable world for all the humans and all the other creatures sharing it together. That's, I think, the extraordinary challenge of our times. And it's one that it's easy to get pessimistic about, to feel like, oh no, things have gone so far. But when we cultivate these teachings and practices, there's really no end to the possibility of where an open heart, a transformed heart, a free heart and mind can take us to. And so all of what we're doing here in training the mind, training the heart, helps us, you know, whether it's, you know, as we were doing in the meditation, noticing where we're caught up and just allowing, letting be, letting go. Or when we notice we're caught up in stories in our minds, coming back to the breath, coming back to the body. All the ways we do this, as well as the ways we bring compassion and kindness into our lives through wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood. All the ways we cultivate wisdom, a wise way of seeing and wise intention, help us to open our hearts. And as we open our hearts, then we open naturally to the wish to transform the hearts and minds of all beings, help all beings to awaken. It opens us to living more as bodhisattvas in the world. And this is kind of where I think we are today, both an extraordinary challenge that we're facing, but also extraordinarily powerful practices that we have available to us. And recognizing that that I went on quite a bit there. What I'd like us to do is have Emily help us come into our bodies with some mindful movement, if you would do that, Emily, and then we'll come back with some sharing. Thank you.
Let me invite you to stand up and take a moment to just feel your feet and the space around, twisting. Feeling the energy against your arms, the energy that enfolds us all in this moment. And then open up wide, palms up, and inhale, reach up and gather the energy of the sun, the clouds, the sky, and bring that energy to your heart. And then gather the energy of everyone here, the kindness and compassion, and bring that to your heart. And then gather the energy of the earth, that which provides so much abundance, nourishing seeds, and bring that to your heart. And then bring your arms out wide again. Grasp your left wrist in your right hand. Inhale, lifting and reaching out. Exhale, tilt the body. Only go to your comfort level in this moment. And then inhale up, switch hands, and tilt over to the left, working according to your comfort, your body. And inhale up, float your arms down, move your shoulders individually, have your dance just as we breathe and live and come down. And then inhale and reach out again. And exhale, bend and place your hands above your knees, coming into a flat back. Inhale, reaching your head and chest up. Exhale, fold at the hip crease only as far as you are comfortable doing. But reach down, tilt your balance so that your hips are a little bit past your heels. And lower, feeling the pull of gravity. Engaging with the breath, inhaling, opening the rib cage. Exhale, softening, feeling the surrender to the earth. And then place your hands above your knees. Press on your feet and lift up. Rolling your shoulders as you rise, engaging your energy again in circles and circle again. One more movement with your shoulders, clasp your hands behind your waist. Inhale, reaching up, opening the chest. Exhale, lower your hands below your waist, gathering your shoulder blades together. Inhale up, recenter, and lift your head and chest up to the sky. Exhale, lower your hands again. And back to your waist, float your arms up, float your, and dance, engaging. And then bring your hands to heart center, above your head, and draw that center line down your body to the heart, turning your energy downward. And we'll sweep our arms up with the exhale. Whoosh! Again, drawing that center line down to the heart, turning your hands down to the root chakra. And exhale, whoosh! Float your arms down one more time to the heart and release your energy out to the sky, to all of us here, and to the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. It's lovely as always. Thank you. So I'd love to have you share anything that you would like to, anything that's come up for you today through in the talk or in the meditation. Please feel free to share, or in the movement. If anyone would like to share anything or ask anything in the full group, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll recognize you either physically or in the through the icons reactions. How's everyone doing today? Good. Thanks, Sona, for sharing that book on John Lewis. I've seen John Meacham and on TV, and his book has been mentioned, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I'd like to hear John Meacham reflect on what's going on and put it in a perspective of hundreds of years. That's pretty good. Thank you, Bob, for your sharing. Thank you, Margarita, you're sharing about your mum who died too young in 1973, and not a day passes that I don't think of her. Thank you. You know what, I want to mention that that next week I think the intention is to have a session, a class where we remember loved ones. And if you would like to bring something along, and we'll find the best way of doing it in the virtual context, but have so that everyone who wishes to, you don't have to, but if you wish to, bring along a memorial or a photo or whatever of somebody in your life. And it might be somebody who's not necessarily your family. It could be just somebody who's been very meaningful to you. Whatever speaks to you, without emphasis being on people who have passed on from this this realm. Yeah. Thank you all for the sharing in the chat. Anyone have anything you'd like to share or ask, or anything confusing in the talk? Everyone good? Kerry, is that a yes? Okay.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Just a comment on some of the work that I do up here is through peace building and restorative justice, and we work in the prisons. And so much of your talk was focused a little bit on the John Lewis and the Rwanda you mentioned about dehumanizing each other. We need to do that in order to create war, in order to create division, and so forth. And you can bring that down to the smallest level in our own families, with ourselves, with our own minds. We can create war with them by setting them apart, creating an other, even within our own selves. And it's a big topic, and I try and talk to public groups that aren't familiar with working in prisons and working with inmates who often are dehumanized and called the other, and especially, I'll say the word, sex offenders, who are the worst of the worst. And so if we continue to do this, it really limits the healing of our society, and even our our connection to ourselves is hurt by this. So no, I appreciated you bringing it up, and it's a huge subject, but thank you. You have great talk today.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing. A deep bow to you for that. And to all who are doing such important work. I've done, as some of you know, I've done a lot of work over the years with humanitarian aid workers in the Middle East and in Africa. And I'm always inspired by, their sacrifice and their generosity and their compassion. And I've been happy to be part of teams helping them through these practices that we do together, helping them work with their own stresses, because I often share this, if we're so stressed out and anxious and fearful and overwhelmed ourselves, we're not going to be available for anybody else. We're just going to be, we'll be in that fight or flight place. And, if somebody's, lying wounded on the pavement, we're apt to kind of say, well, no, I've got to take care of myself. Maybe that's overstating it, but that sense we have to take care of ourselves. And it's been really, for me, it's been really, powerful and eye-opening to be able to do that work of bringing in the practices of mindfulness and compassion and loving kindness to help those who are doing, essential work in the world. And I mean, one of the things I think we know is that, with the pandemic, perhaps even more so with climate change, more and more people will be affected on the top of the hundreds of millions who are already receiving food aid or living in areas of conflict and war. That's going to increase, as people's homes get overflown with floods. They're gonna move, and they're gonna, out of that, conflict is going to increase, food need and other needs are going to increase. So we're in for some challenging times ahead, and I think without these teachings and practices, I could imagine myself as feeling really overwhelmed by what we're facing today. And even with the practices, at times it can feel overwhelming. But I think what these teachings and practices do is, among other things, is to give us the kind of the spaciousness of heart and mind that can open to the suffering with compassion rather than with fear. Because often if we're in a fearful place, we won't be able to keep our hearts open. And so that's why the world needs more and more people whose minds are trained and whose hearts are open to the suffering of the world. And I'm glad to see, some beautiful things going on among younger people, next generation and the generation on, a lot of courage. And, just as the challenges of Jim Crow and segregation and the history of slavery, created the conditions that allowed, people like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and John Lewis and Reverend Lawson and so many others to act so courageously in the world. Similarly, the conditions of today, I think, are bringing out the best in the new generation. So, there's optimism, I feel, in that area as well. But it's definitely not, it's like that Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, a blessing or a curse, whatever. The times are definitely interesting, and many other adjectives could be used as well. What about, we have a very short meditation to finish and end with some announcements. So just take a few minutes to take a moment or two to connect again, open to what's alive for you right now. You could close your eyes, drop your attention down into the body. Connect with the energy in your body. Now, what are you noticing right now? You know, if something it feels difficult or tight or challenging, see if you can make space around it, open space around it. Breathe into it. Hold what's present for you right now with kindness, with acceptance. And if the heart feels more open, more connected, more spacious, allow yourself to take that in, allow yourself to feel that, maybe even letting it spread. Cultivating the good, abandoning the unskillful, letting go of what creates suffering, what doesn't serve us. We might finish with a kind of an adapted Tonglen practice, practice out of the Tibetan tradition. But with this one, just breathe in kindness. As you breathe in kindness for yourself, wishing yourself well. Just recognizing, acknowledging the challenges, the things that are difficult for you, maybe at this time. And just holding yourself with kindness and compassion. Could be accompanied by a word or a phrase. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. So breathing in kindness, compassion towards yourself. And as you breathe out kindness to everyone, all of us here today. The humans, the non-humans, the animals who are joining us. Breathe out a wish of kindness, of compassion, care. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be filled with loving kindness, held in loving kindness. May you awaken to your true goodness, to your Buddha nature. So breathing in kindness, care to yourself. Breathing out kindness, compassion to all of us here together today. And you could let that wish, those wishes go out more broadly, out into the world, wherever your heart, your imagination takes you. Maybe people who are suffering from the fires in the West, fires in Europe, the floods, those who've suffered through COVID, those who've lost loved ones. Those suffering from racial injustice and other forms of hatred, unskillful acts and words. Breathing in kindness to yourself, breathing out compassion and kindness to all who are here and all beings everywhere. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh, his poem For Warmth. I hold my face between my hands. No, I'm not crying. I hold my face in my two hands to keep the loneliness warm. Two hands protecting, two hands nourishing, two hands preventing my soul from leaving me in anger. Thank you, everyone. And we'll just share a few announcements. What I mentioned about next week, invite you to think about that and hope you can join us from that. We'll also send out a message around it. So just to kind of to the CML list and maybe more broadly around that having that be an opportunity to remember loved ones, remember those who've important in our lives who've passed. And share as well just a couple of things coming up for me. I've got a class on training the mind on the Eightfold Path that begins on September 20th. That's on the IMCW website. We might have a chance to share it on here. Thank you, Cassie, for sharing that. That begins September 20th. Rebecca and I have a weekend meditation retreat in person, still on. Everyone will be vaccinated. It's up in about an hour and a half, I think 2 hours out of town in Pennsylvania. October 1st through 3rd. And then we have a retreat in Ireland, and you can go to my website for that. That's in June of 2022, if anyone's interested. And just share that I think everyone's familiar, there's not a charge, no cost for the class, but if you would like to, you can give dana or donation. It's how the teachings have come down through us through 100 generations, and it helps support me as a teacher. And I'm very grateful for your support.